Welcome one, welcome all to the Tortillas Takes podcast. You are on once again with your boy, Albie Shore, and the Texas Tech Red Raider basketball team had a fairly eventful week and a half, both on the men and women's side. But before we talk about that, we have some other things and other notes, tech notes to talk about. And so to join me here on the podcast and discuss all things Red Raiders, I have the Red Raider expert himself, Joe Lopez. What's going on, Joe?
Man, that conversation we just had was epic. I'm sorry nobody else could have heard that greatness that was going on.
The way Rudy should have actually been.
Okay. The way Rudy should have actually ended is watching him grow up from nothing and then just watching him graduate from Notre Dame. He's not ever touching the football field. Yeah.
No, get him off the football field. He is it's when he becomes a professor. Nothing to do with football. He grows up, he gets his degree, he's a GA, and that is him grinding it out.
Yeah.
He's a GA at Notre Dame.
Yeah, and then they carry him out after he gets his diploma. It's a perfect story.
That's what we were saying. The montage of him is him on the football field is him writing tests.
Yeah.
Filling out scantrons. Yes. That's the real Rudy story.
That's the real Rudy story.
That's the real Rudy story.
That's the what is it? What was that VH1 stuff that they used to do? Like, behind the music. Yeah, behind Rudy.
Because here's the problem with Rudy is because of that movie, thousands of unathletic, scrawny kids believe that with just heart and determination, they can also play at a school like Notre Dame. And that is just not true. Let's stop lying to these kids.
Absolutely.
You ran a 5.2 40, Jones. All right? Your career is done. You will be a backup for this 3A school out in the Odessa area. And when you're done, you will go through academics. You better hope your grades are good enough for Stephen F. Austin. All right? That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. There's nothing more than that. That's it. So, yeah.
It actually reminds me of like one of the things I hate about kid shows. When like a lot of like teenage shows, they're in high school and they graduate and they're going to college. And the colleges they go to are always like, yeah, what school are you going to? I don't know. I'm deciding between Harvard, Stanford, Michigan, UCLA. Right. Like those are the only 5 schools that ever have existed. Right. You know what pissed me?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you remember the show Sister Sister? Tia and Tamara?
Yeah.
So one of the things that infuriates me about that show is Tamara spends 3.5 years jacking around in high school. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh, everybody's going to University of Michigan, so I can take it seriously for one semester and get into a top 5 public school in the country. This is ridiculous. I hate it. See, you got to be realistic.
For me, if it was like my own life, it would be like, oh, look, Joe got into Midwestern Oklahoma State University. Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah.
Joe.
The Fighting Plainsmen.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I was a 6 foot, 195 defensive end. The only school that said maybe was McMurray out in Abilene. Shout out to McMurray. Right? They were like, you know what? Something about him. He can make that D2 jump.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the real life story. That's the Rudy story.
Yeah, that's the Albie story. That's
the Albie story. McMurray. All right. Yeah. Not no Notre Dame. Right. No, realistic stories. And then you got
I got letters from colleges just to attend, but not to do anything more than that.
They're like, hey man.
Hey, if you want to come on down, come on.
You want to come to admitted? You want to come to Admitted Students Day?
Yeah,
those are the site visits. Admitted Students Day. Yeah, exactly. Well, somebody who may be taking a campus visit to Texas Tech is one Carson Beck. That's right. Today, news broke. So Pete Daniel, who is a very big voice in the college football realm, mentioned on a podcast or actually I would say On3 actually broke the news that he is Carson Beck to enter the transfer portal, and Pete Daniel talked about it. So Carson Beck would actually enter the NFL draft, and I think he may still be going through the NFL draft process. But I think early on, his agent was like, "Hey, probably just put your name in the portal too, because I'm not hearing great things, right?" So with that, Pete Thamel talked about 3 schools to look out for to potentially request that will be on the hunt for Carson Beck's services. 1, Ohio State. That makes sense. Will Howard is a senior. He was a one and done for Ohio State anyway. He's about to graduate finally once he's done with Ohio State. The other one, Miami. Again, makes sense. They had Cam Ward. He's about to go to the NFL. He was also brought on as a one and done. Those are 2 programs that are like, hey, we're not really good at developing our own quarterbacks, so we need them to get these one and dones in the transfer portal. The third school, however, Texas Tech. Texas Tech. So, and that is one where let's wait. Hold on. So, Texas Tech is a school. Their quarterback is a guy who's been in the program for over 3 years. He was a starting quarterback for the entire year last year. He actually was a starting quarterback for a couple games the year before that. He should be entrenched. And they also have a backup quarterback that they also got out of high school that also played a couple games this year. So what's up there? So what is your first thoughts with the I think there's a 2-part question here. 1, what do you think about the potential of Carson Beck signing on to the Red Raiders? And then 2, why are we looking for starting caliber quarterbacks in the first place?
Whenever I first saw that news of that breaking, I was just like, okay, so how bad is Barron's shoulder? Like, it was just like, that was the first thought. That Barron's shoulder or his recovery or whatever surgery that he had done to his arm was going to be a longer process of a recovery time, or maybe just not, something that was going to be work for him. It was just like, okay, I guess Barron's really bad. And we all saw what Will Hammond's capable of doing when Will Hammond's good. But we all, I think collectively, I could say this is, I think he needs 1 more year before he's ready to take over the reins at some kind of university here at Texas Tech or somewhere else. I don't want to put that out there, but just in case, given the circumstances of what could potentially happen if a Carson Beck does come to Texas Tech, what kind of happens to the rest of the quarterback room. But yeah, I was more worried about what was going on with Barron's shoulder itself. And then just the thought of Carson Beck coming over here, SEC quarterback, played a whole lot more meaningful games, than Barron, Morton, or anybody on our roster for that matter. And, he's a proven winner. But, I mean, is it really that much of an upgrade from Barron? I mean, Carson Beck is, a product of having so much talent on the front end, on his offensive line, his running back room, his wide receivers. I mean, his job is pretty simple. Just don't mess up. So it's like, well, do you just need a game manager to come in to Lubbock to manage what we have brought up? And then, hey, off you go to the NFL. And then Will Hammond comes in and, picks up where you leave off. But I don't think you're going to see a huge upgrade if you go to a Carson Beck, other than the meaningful games that he's played in comparison to any other quarterback on our roster. But, it's just very odd to see that we were out there shopping for a starting quarterback in this transfer cycle.
Yeah, I mean, so I for Texas Tech right now going into next season, right, we have Barron Morton's projected to be the starter still. We have Will Hammond, like you mentioned, that is the backup quarterback that was playing. I think the projected QB3 ends up probably being Lloyd Jones, who's going to be the true freshman quarterback out of Hitchcock. And maybe there's somebody else can kind of rise in and kind of be that QB3 as well. That's kind of a little bit more up in the air. But I do think that with the Carson Beck or any starting quarterback, like, it doesn't necessarily even have to be Beck. I mean, there's other rumors about Texas wanting a starting caliber quarterback as well. I do question, I kind of see it a couple of vantage points. One being beefing up that quarterback room, right? It was great that Barron Morton had the whole year where he played for 12 years. We know he wasn't healthy, but he played for 12 games, I should say, 12 games. He's not Alan Bowman. He played for 12 games and actually played the entire season. And we haven't had that since Nick Shimanek. And so that was, I think, great to have. But I do think it's At times, Morton left something to be desired. At times, it was a question of, well, like you mentioned, as far as the game manager, do we want a little bit more? Now, I would argue, I don't know if Carson Beck gives you that, because a lot of the times all Georgia wanted him to do was manage games, right? And he did a fairly good job against, I mean, Georgia, 90% of the time, they're so much better than the team they're playing, right? When they're playing teams like a lowly Texas, they're so much better than them that he doesn't have to do. I'm joking, but even against games like Texas or like an Alabama where he has to do a little bit more, he has struggled. Right, against everybody else, the Mississippi States, the Vanderbilts of the world, they're so much better that he doesn't have to do much. So what happens when Carson Beck is put in a Behren Morton situation where it's not a big gap between us and the next team? When we play Colorado, it's not a big gap. Right? Even with our increased talent that we're going to have next year. Colorado got talent too. Kansas State has talent too. Iowa State has talent too. Right? And so Utah, we play Utah next year. They're going to have some talent too. So I do question the difference between the two. And it does kind of bring up the point that you're mentioning as far as just how bad is Morton's shoulder, right? Is there worry that he comes back and he's not the same? And we saw Hammond in the bowl game. He's not ready yet. And there's a lot of invested into this season. This 2025 season we can't be the money that's been put in and invested for this year. We can't just go 7-5, 8-4. This is, we need to be competing, contending in Arlington type of money that was put out. And so if there's a thought of the Cody Campbells, the Dustin Wombles, the administration's Giovanetti's thoughts of, well, maybe we do need to get another quarterback, a starting caliber quarterback, to be even keel and either whether it's compete with Morton or just straight out beat him out for the job because we got a lot riding on this season. And that's, and I'm not sure. It definitely is definitely something to I guess to think about, because it's an interesting conundrum.
Definitely interesting, especially Carson Beck coming off of an elbow injury. You have Behren Morton coming off of a shoulder injury. So you're going to replace Morton with a guy who's coming off of a surgery as well. And, the elbow's just as important as a piece as your shoulder is, when you're throwing the ball. So what's the play here? Is this a money grab by the camp for Carson Beck's people? Like, hey, we know Texas Tech is spending money. Let's just go ahead and, put our name in there. Or is there actually, smoke to this? Because Cody Campbell just recently tweeted out an eye emojis. Is this a troll job by, everybody involved in this deal? It's just so hard to think why Carson Beck would choose or even have Tech in that top three. He's a kid from Florida, Miami. For obvious reasons. Cam Ward's gone. You need a quarterback that could go in right away. Ohio State with, the Will Howard issue. I mean, all of those make sense. We are an anomaly in this equation, and not saying that we don't belong there, but now it just seems like we're just trying to money whip people just to coming here. And this one doesn't seem like one that we necessarily need.
Yeah. and I think I'd agree with that. Now, I will say, so here's, and I mentioned it, I tweeted it out, I talked about it in a group chat. It ain't my money. It ain't my money. I know the rumor is that the price tag may be upwards of $2 million or so. That's okay. It ain't my money. I think we've been conditioned to think, and I mentioned this even when what's his name? The receiver went into the portal. Michael Hudson went into the portal. That right. This thought that, now that it's almost like he's relieved the salary cap. Like, there's no salary cap in college NIL, right? Like, we've been conditioned to think about professional sports and there being a salary cap, and when one person leaves, it gives you more money for. There's no salary cap. This is just how much does Campbell, Womble, and the Matador Club want to spend. Like, that's all it is. There's no salary cap in any of this. So, so to me, it ain't my money. So in that, if you want to pay to have a Carson Beck, a Quinn Ewers, whoever come in here and compete for the job, as long as you don't promise them anything, have them compete for the job. A good example of this, and it's the one that was fresh on my mind when I first saw this, was the 2023 Ole Miss Rebels team, right? At the time of that 2023 team, Jackson Dart, who is now setting the world on fire, but Jackson Dart was a high-profile guy who had just transferred. It was a freshman, just transferred from USC out to Ole Miss. Walker Howard, if you remember Walker Howard, had played at LSU and was a 5-star quarterback, played sparingly at LSU, and then transferred his way over to Ole Miss. And then I think the biggest shock of them all was that Spencer Sanders, who had spent 3+ years at Oklahoma State, decided to also transfer. It wasn't shocked that he transferred from Oklahoma State. It was shocked that he transferred to Ole Miss, who already had Walker Howard and Jackson Dart, right? And so there was this thought of, okay, well, that's like how many – I remember how many quarterbacks does Lane Kiffin need, right? Like, but at the end of the day, that quarterback room was full, and it was, all right, may the best man win, and Jackson Dart ended up winning it, and Jackson Dart looks to be a pretty good quarterback. Like, I don't know if he's planning on coming back or if he's going to enter the draft, but if he does enter the draft, he's probably, in my estimation, one of the 3 to 5 best quarterbacks in the draft. Like, he's a pretty good quarterback. If he comes back, he will be a candidate for the potential Heisman next year. Like, that's how good he is. So I'm of the belief that, if the smoke is real, and if we decide to pay for Carson Beck, as long as nothing's promised, bring him in the quarterback room. I don't care. May the best man win.
Right.
So that's kind of how I look at it there.
That'd be a pretty crowd. So you would assume that somebody would be out, right? Because you would have Barron, Will Hammond, Lloyd Jones, Griffiths from Wake Forest, which is a part of that transfer portal class.
Yeah, that's right.
And then Lloyd Jones, which is a true freshman.
I would assume somebody would be out next year, which is exactly what happened in the Ole Miss scenario, right? I would assume that it'd be a free for all, everybody battle it out, right? And maybe somebody takes a redshirt year and it's like, you know what, I'm up out of here. Right. But that's what I would assume. I would assume that they'd fight it out and see who wins. I mean, if I'm Baron Morton, and if I'm Baron Morton and I lose the starting quarterback job, then I'm saying, you know what, this shoulder actually hurts me more than I'm letting on, so I'm a medical red shirt, and then I'm out of here next year. If I'm, if Carson Beck, same thing. If he loses, like that's what I'd expect. But I would hope, right? I'll say this: any quarterback that's scared of a little competition, you don't want them in there anyway. So if you see somebody enter the transfer portal just because another commitment happens, then I'm like, all right, well, it looks like we don't really need you here to begin with. Right. But yeah, I do agree with you. Eventually, I would expect. Oh, already this game. Eventually, I would expect something to happen. But the more the merrier. Let's see who's going to win out that quarterback competition. I also brought it up in our group chat a couple years ago when we had Tyler Shuck, Baron Morton, Donovan Smith. That was a strong quarterback room, and we needed all three of them because all three of them couldn't stay healthy. So so it's so you never know. You definitely never know.
Yeah, but just definitely an interesting name, Carson Beck to be, with Tech. You would think that maybe if like a Quinn Ewers, if he had entered his name in the transfer portal, given all that other stuff, that name he's been around here, he's visited here, he's I guess stayed in contact with Joey, things like that. Whatever, that makes sense. The Carson Beck one just to me is just maybe like a Hail Mary, in a sense, like this is the best player available. Let's throw some money at him and see what he thinks, see if he'll take the bite, and then we'll figure out the rest. But man, it's definitely an eye-opening tweet this morning from Thamel or On3 that said, hey, text in on this as well. So we'll see how it plays out.
There's also another theory to it all of that, like similar to Quinn Ewers, he's just using Tech to bump up the price tag. Right. Who's the school that was spending the most money in the transfer portal? Yeah, put their name on there. Hey, Miami, bump up that price tag. You see what Texas Tech was doing. You don't want to lose to them.
Yeah, they're just handing out signed blank checks right now. It doesn't even matter. We're filling in the zeros, So.
Yeah, that's right. So I do want to get your opinion on something else as well. And I didn't tell you about this beforehand, but Diego Pavia, the quarterback from Vanderbilt, he actually sued to get an extra year of eligibility. The basis of his lawsuit is that he was in junior college during the pandemic. They did not award extra years of eligibility to junior college players. And they should. And so a lot of people don't kind of know what the lawsuit is about, but that's really what it is that everybody got an extra year of eligibility but the JUCO, and we should. And that's fair. And so Diego's getting another year of eligibility. I can't remember who. Somebody else also just is either just filed or is planning on filing a lawsuit to get another year of eligibility as well. I'd have to look it up. But there has been a thought of, well, what does this mean for junior college players, period? And does this mean that junior college players could potentially not have any of their eligibility count towards the pro year, right? Another idea that's floating is 5 years, period. You come to campus when you're 18, you leave when you're 23. There's no red shirts. There's no medical red shirts. There's no COVID years. It is you come in 1 year, you have a freshman year, a sophomore year, a junior year, a senior year, and a super senior year, and that's it, right? So what are your thoughts, first starting off with the potential for the JUCO players? Are you for them not using their eligibility? Are you against that? And then also, what about that 5-year in and out rule?
We had our own in Davian Carter. I believe he got granted because he was at JUCO before he went to Memphis, and then Memphis to Texas Tech, and he got that. He's going to be back, this year on our offensive line. So
that may be what I was thinking of, actually.
Yeah, that's massive in its own right. It's kind of hard to gauge, especially with all these JUCO players and stuff like that, because once they go from FCS up to, or JUCO up to, FBS itself, how long are these guys actually staying in a program as well? What's how in the NIL, how that works out, if they're getting money from already, are they going to be like a preferred walk-on, or if they're going to be on scholarship? Like, how's that whole everything, like, guess behind closed doors, that what we don't have the capabilities of actually looking and seeing what they're getting. But to me, I think you should put a cap on it, which would be falling along the line of, hey, once you're here, you have 5, and no, the medical red shirt and those red shirt years those are just so finicky, especially if you don't get any playing time from the start. I'm sure that there's probably a healthy median in there somewhere, but I would just probably say the JUCO and not allowing them to use that towards their eligibility once they go to big time. That's more than fair, because it just seems fair. More fair than just saying, hey, once you're in, you have 5 years and that's it. Sorry about you. If you get hurt, sorry about you. If this happens, sorry about you. If you transfer, sorry about you. It's tough. But personally, I just think the being able to hold on to the to where you're at from JUCO and not losing that time is, well, that's doable. I don't have a problem with it.
I'm gonna push back on you a little bit. So for the argument against it for the JUCO one is that people will just use JUCOs as their minor leagues, right? So if you're Alabama, why give a scholarship to an 18-year-old when you can give a scholarship to it? Why give a scholarship to an 18-year-old freshman when you can give that same scholarship to a 20-year-old freshman, right? Why give? And so, like, now you start seeing that funneling where consistently college sports now becomes 20 to 25 as opposed to 18 to 23. So that's the argument on the other end, there. And so I will say, I actually, at first I saw the rule about the 5 years. And so the JUCO thing, I don't have a skin in the game. I think either one is fine with me. I get the argument on both sides of it. Do I think teams may abuse it? Possibly. Do I think players may abuse it? Possibly. But cream rhymes to the top. But the 5 years one, when I first heard it, I was like, no, that's dumb. We've had the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior thing for forever. It aligns with us being in school, et cetera. And then I kind of realized the point of it, and I like keep it simple, stupid. I love it. I love simplicity. And I started thinking of, why are we more lenient on players in college than in high school? Like, when you're in 9th grade, in 10th grade, if you tear your ACL, sorry about you. You just lost your sophomore year. And hopefully you can come back from it, right? Yeah. And so, like, a part of me, I'm kind of like, sucks to suck, but yeah, this 5-year rule works for me. I'm like, let's make it, and I think it takes away a lot of that. Like Cam McCormick out in Miami, that's like 29 or however old he is on his 8th year. That's ridiculous. Like, that is crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, like, let's make these rules just very simplistic. I kind of like the whole, hey, we come in, you have 5 years. Do with it what you will. If something happens in your senior year, man, that really stinks. Oh well, life sucks. Life is tough, right? Like I kind of, that's how it is at every level, and even in the pros, right? It's not like if you sign a 5-year contract and you get hurt that 5th year, it's not like the team is like, oh, well, you know what? We'll still pay you $15 million for an extra year because you got hurt last year. They're like, hey, you got hurt. Contract's up, buddy. We might give you 5 now. Right? Like, so I'm just, I kind of am at the point where I'm like, let's keep it simple. If you're good at, and it also takes away the red shirts in that aspect. So there's no playing with the red shirt. If you're good enough to play your first year, you're going to play. If you're not, you're not going to play. It's just simple as that. There's no games. And I've grown to like the 5-year thing, mostly because I'm lazy and I'm tired of not understanding whether people are leaving college or not. But yeah, no, I've actually grown accustomed to being a fan of all that.
Yeah, because there's a certain level of coddling that goes along with all of these, these superstar kind of athletes in college, to where it's like, oh, it's okay, we'll protect you regardless. And I get it. A lot of these universities have a lot of money invested in some of these players, and they want to make sure that it's the right business decision for them. But at the end of the day, it's still a business decision. So
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so.
And the best business decision that you and I can make and everybody else can make is going to charliehustle.com. Charlie Hustle is the official vintage retailer for the Big 12 and for Ten12 Network and for your boys here at Tortillas and Takes. They want you to be the best dressed fan this season. So make sure to go to charliehustle.com using our promo code 101215. That is TEN1215 to get 15% off of everything you see on that site that isn't on sale. 15% off of it all, right? Because we want you to be swagged out, but affordably. All right. So that, again, promo code 101215 at charliehustle.com. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. So we are almost 30 minutes into the podcast. We have not talked basketball. So men's basketball. So we didn't get a chance to talk about how embarrassing it was that we lost at home against UCF. And that was, Joe, I thought the St. Joseph loss was about as bad as it can get. That was a bad loss. We were double-digit favorites in a neutral site, and we lost that game. We have been outdone because I think this UCF loss is even worse at home with your star back and JT Toppin, and you lose a game that you could have won. But a game you could have won, but a game that UCF was in the lead most of the time. I mean, it just was not a good look whatsoever.
Yeah, a lot of lapses per Coach McCaslin, and Coach McCaslin took that loss pretty personally because a lot of that he took the blame for, rightfully so. I mean, that's whenever a team isn't fully prepared for a game. Some people look for a scapegoat of, we're trying to work JT Toppin back into the deal because he's been out for the last couple of weeks or this or that. Coaches could, just kind of, slide under the rug there with, an answer. But he took full ownership of that. And that's something that I really love about Coach McCaslin, saying, hey, look, I didn't have my team ready. And this is what happens when the team's not ready, and it's not going to happen again. There were lapses on defense, on our perimeter defense, and then we couldn't buy a bucket from beyond the arc. There was just these dry spells there in and out of the game where we couldn't get a basket to fall. And, they had their guys on their side that, just didn't seem like missing. That one player, I can't remember his name because I was screaming it every single time he hit a shot because he was like 12 for 12 at one point in time in the game. And it's just like, I don't even know what you want to do. Just have somebody run from the stands and stab this guy because that's the only way he's going to get stopped. Like, this is just like it was bad. But, the fight was there. You could see it towards the end. Granted, it was a little too late kind of deal to where you could actually have won that game. But you do got to love the scrappiness at that section because I think they were down double digits. I was at work, so I didn't get to watch all the games. So they were down double digits at some point in time, and then they clawed their way back and then made it a very, very close game. So a tough loss, the game that you don't want, one of the games that you don't want to lose at home. Yeah, you could lose to an Iowa State, or yeah, you could lose to a Baylor or a Kansas or a Houston at home. those all make sense. The Central Florida loss at home is not the one you wanted to take.
No, can't have it happen. And like you mentioned, Tech at one point was down 17 in the second half. It did feel like it felt terrible at that time. And then I would argue from that moment on, they locked in a little bit more defensively. But the biggest piece, this defense stinks. Like, the defense is not good. And that's, listen, we can joke about whether or not Tech fans know ball. We know defense. We know defense. And that defense, this defense that we've been watching for the last 2 months, is just not good. They've let up so many points. The offense is fantastic, actually. But there's not a game that you score in the 80s, you should win. We scored 83 points in this game. If you score 83 points in a game, you should win. In college basketball, I fully believe that. And so the fact that we scored 83 points in this game and lost is the problem. The first half, where we're giving up for almost 50 points and a half, is is atrocious. Then you give up 40 points in the neighboring half. So it's not even like, oh, well, it's just one half where they went crazy. Both times you gave up over 40 points, gave almost 50 in the first. So, like, in general, just not good. And so coming into the game, we talked about the fact that UCF had bad defense. We knew they had bad defense. They have one of the worst defenses in all of power conference teams. Like, they're not a good defensive team. And I mentioned the fact that I still thought we were going to win by double digits because I thought our defense, though not as staunch as it has been from even last year all the way to Beard's first year, Tubby's last year, I thought that we're still miles ahead of UCF. But when our defense is as bad as theirs, they said, oh, we can put up shots too, right? Darius Johnson had 24 points in this game. Keyshawn Hall had 22 points in this game. They're like, we can put up shots too. Don't you worry. And it was just an embarrassing effort. And like you mentioned, I am glad McCaslin took it to heart. He was pissed. I don't think I've seen McCaslin as upset as he was after that UCF game. And I think the way that they played the next game at Utah, kind of, you know how, like, you acting up in public. Your mom takes you behind the woodshed and pops you in the butt a few times, and then you start acting right for the rest of the day. Tech started acting right for the rest of the day. Best defensive performance we've seen all year, holding Utah to less than 30 points in the second half, only 65 points total. Now I know this is not a good Utah team, but it don't matter. Sometimes you got to get that mojo back, and I think they did that in that game.
Yeah, you get back to what you were doing for a majority of the season with the field goal percentage, over 50% in field goal percentage, and then shooting over 45%, from beyond the arc. Whenever you had played UCF, you shot 18% on the game from beyond the arc. I mean, you don't need to make 23s in a game to be successful in this league, but you do have to knock down the open ones. And we just didn't seem like we had got it done in the Central Florida game. And then, coming across into the Utah game, a lot of other players, got in on that, especially Elijah Hawkins, who's been, which we'll talk about, more in depth here in a minute. Over the last couple of games, it seems like he's taken Kerwin's shot from beyond the arc. He's shooting the ball at a higher percentage than Kerwin Walton, and Kerwin Walton is known for a 3-point threat. So, this game was just like you said, we got yelled at, and we're going to be on the right track. And, I'm sorry, the next team that we play, we're going to be fully all in. And Utah just happened to be on the opposite end of that beatdown for sure.
So does Kerwin Walton just decide he doesn't want to play basketball anymore? Or let me tell you his minutes production the past few games. I know we haven't gotten to BYU yet, but he put up 8 minutes against BYU and had a Tony Snell score, 0 points, 0 assists. He did have 2 rebounds. Good for him. 11 minutes against Utah, 7 minutes against UCF, right? So in the last 3 games, Kerwin Walton has put up a resounding 26 total minutes of play in 3 games. That is a coach saying that something up with you, buddy, and I don't know what it is, right? And so a guy that we thought was going to be a really big, important piece for this team is just not looking like it. But they didn't really need him in this game against Utah, right? I think that the big piece there is Darren. JT Toppin still kind of looks a little hurt, like he's still getting his feet under him. He's still kind of working, but that's fine when Darian Williams and Elijah Hawkins are playing like they played against Utah and BYU, right? Like Darian Williams had a great game against getting to the line a lot, driving in the lane, making the smart play. I think he played really well, and then facilitating, which is not something that I necessarily expected out of Darian Williams coming into the season. I didn't think he would be the guy, but it's really helpful when you have a hot game like that. People come to you and you can kind of dish it off and say, hey, JT, go crazy. Right? Hey, Federico, go crazy. Because Federico is the one that's really getting the dish off, right? And Federico is really starting to come into his own as well, especially in this Utah series.
Yeah, absolutely. His percentage from the field is remarkable. It's north of, what is it, 70% or 80%? Like, I mean, granted, it's like an alley-oop every time, but whatever, high percentage shots, he's making the most of every opportunity that he's had. His role is steadily increasing, and then with the injury to Toppin early on in the season, he got those minutes, and he's starting to become, a very big key to the rotation for Coach McCaslin. So big time.
Yeah, sorry guys. We picked the absolute worst time to record this podcast because Notre Dame and Kent State are playing right now, and it's an incredible game. They just got a sack on third down. It's amazing. But yeah, no, Texas Tech in this Utah series, I think blowing out Utah. The offense was still gunning, and the offense was gonna. I truly do think we have one of the best offenses in the country. Ken Palm has us rated 7th. Also, when I was looking up Ken Palm earlier today before this episode. We are still a Ken Palm darling, which I find kind of shocking. We're ranked 18th overall on Ken Palm, but 7th best offense. I absolutely agree with because this offense is gunning. I mean, it doesn't matter who we're playing, but I think one thing to note is that though Utah's not a good team, this is still a conference game on the road on a Saturday. This is a weekend game, right? A weekend game, and what sounded like a full house in the first 5 minutes. It wasn't. It didn't sound like that after the first 5 minutes. But Saturday games in the Big 12 is always going to be. It doesn't matter who you play. It's always going to be kind of a tougher battle. But able to not just get the win, but blow them boys out, I think was definitely impressive. Especially as we head on to the other game in the Utah series, which was the BYU game, which was always going to be a little bit tougher, right? BYU is a better team than Utah. And I think BYU punched us in the mouth early on. And this is the type of game I was excited that we had because this was the type of game where we were punched in the mouth repeatedly, but we also did some punching back.
Absolutely. Absolutely did we do some punching back. This was a very, very physical game, and they did out-physical us for a while there, in different sets of the game, and that zone defense was causing issues for our offense. They were, pushing us back towards midcourt, and, they were doing their thing and getting rebounds. They were making the tough shots. They were doing everything that what we claim that we want to do as far as the toughest team wins and what Coach McCaslin has instilled in this team. And, this is a gritty win, a very, very gritty win. We could talk about, Darian Williams late in the fourth there and how he was able to, late in the second half, when he kind of just sealed the deal, some big shots from Chance McMillan, some big shots from Elijah Hawkins. I mean, these guys, the game's 40 minutes long. Darian was on the court for 36, Elijah 37, Chance 32, and then Kevin Overton for 25. Toppin really didn't give you a whole lot because he was in early on foul trouble there. So, we were finding ways to, be aggressive and be solid on the offensive side without one of our biggest weapons in JT Toppin. And man, this is one of those games where you feel really good about going into this Iowa State game on Saturday, a building moment to that game, at least a confidence builder as far as it goes. You get JT Toppin going again, then you have Darian Williams and Elijah Hawkins playing on different levels right now. Fed coming off the bench, KO coming off the bench, Christian Anderson coming off the bench. You got to like where you're at right now after a game like BYU earlier in the week.
If you're a fan of college football, Notre Dame versus Penn State is an incredible game. Joe, I know you're not. I know you didn't see it. Notre Dame just had like an incredible. Penn State had the ball with 50 seconds to go. Notre Dame had an incredible interception, and now they have the ball on their side of the field. And they're in a position to potentially win the game and go to the national championship game. Sorry, you're always going to get our best typically, but this is like game of the year type stuff that we're seeing here. It's incredible. But yeah, no, I think everything that you said is absolutely the case. I think one thing that's interesting in this game as well, and the box score is not going to show it. You're going to kind of, if you looked at the box score, you'd say that, okay, well, Texas Tech really must have had a strong second half. They really came on in the second half, were able to win. No, actually, I would argue in the second half, we looked done. We looked done at some points, right? There was a point in time where we were down 5, 8 minutes to go, and I'm like, man, BYU has all the momentum. It's just not going to go our way today. I know how this story works. Me and Kenzie joke all the time behind the scenes of like, we've seen this story before, because that's what it felt like when we were down 5. Like, we've seen this story before. But shout out to Darian Williams, who it almost felt like he did take the game into his hands and say, I'm not losing. I don't know what y'all plan on doing today, but I'm not losing. Right? That little hook shot to kind of seal the deal there towards the end of the game, money. Right? And so it really showed that is, like you mentioned, that is that TTW, the toughest team wins. That is the game. That is the game where I think you place it. You say, this is what we need to show. This is how we are and how good we can be. And we're going to need it, Joe, because we got the third-ranked team in the country this Saturday at the USA, 2 o'clock on ESPN. Iowa State's a good team. Listen, a lot of teams in the Big 12 have not lived up to their billing this year. Arizona, they had a big upset against Cincinnati last weekend, but they have not looked great whatsoever. Baylor has not looked as good as we thought they would look whatsoever. But one school that looks up to billing and then some, Iowa State. That team looks dominant. That team looks like a national championship contender. That's what they look like. And they look like a school that's ready to win the Big 12. And so the only loss they've suffered this year is against Auburn, who's also a national championship contender. Right? Like, that's the only loss they've suffered this year. The number 2. So they're the number 3 team in the country. The only loss they've suffered this year is against the number 2 team in the country. That's how good Iowa State is. Joe, how are we going to be able to defeat them?
Mug them in the parking lot before they take the court. I mean, there's not really anything that you can or can't do. I mean, this team is loaded. I mean, they're good. Curtis Jones, man, Jefferson, Gilbert, Lipsy. I mean, all these guys, have all great experience in the Big 12. Minus Jones, right? I think he's the true freshman, right? Curtis Jones is their true freshman. So, but that's just a great coach team. This is just call it for what it is. Everything that they do is sound. They're sound on defense. They're sound on offense, and they just wear you out. And for them to only have that single loss against Auburn, and like you said, Auburn being, a national championship contender potentially as well. That goes to show you what kind of team this is. But this is one of those games where you're going to have to play perfect basketball, keep the turnovers down. You're going to have to make the shots, the open shots whenever they're provided, and you're going to have to really feed on the energy in the USA to kind of, propel yourself into a better position to come out against Iowa State with a win. But it's a very tough ask for this Saturday. I can't say that, this is going to be easy. This is a very, very tough ask because this Iowa State team is really good.
And sorry, correction, I lied to you. Curtis Jones is actually their lead senior, so luckily he ain't gonna be here. He ain't gonna be here next year. But, you are right that Otzelberger, man, he just knows how to coach, and it's really annoying. It really pisses me off that Iowa State keeps hiring these great coaches. Matt Campbell interviewed for the Chicago Bears job. Bears, please hire him away. All right. I beg
absolutely.
I beg of you to hire him away. And I hope they hire Les Miles or somebody like that.
No, our luck it'd be Davis Webb.
Yeah, he's going to be, and he ends up being Lincoln Riley 2.0.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, this Iowa State team, they really do have it all. They're well coached, well balanced. You kind of mentioned there Curtis Jones being their lead guard, but you can't just go over on Curtis Jones because they have the two-headed monster with him and Gilbert, right? If you think that, okay, well, him and Gilbert, that's enough. No, you have Lipsy. Right, you have a guy that can really shoot the rock there. Well, what about the big guys? What about Monchelovich and Jefferson, right, and Jackson? Like this team from top to bottom, like they are built like a team that is ready to win a championship. They actually remind me a lot of that Baylor team that won the Natty a few years back, right? Like that's what they remind me of. That's a team that was guard heavy, guard centric, but had a nice bit of big men that could fill the roles if need be, and they just distributed the ball overall. So this is a well balanced, tough team, and it is going to take everything within our power to be able to defeat them. But let me ask you this: what are your keys for victory to be able to defeat them this Saturday?
Biggest key is going to keep those turnovers down and then keep these little streaks of not doing anything on the offensive side, limited. I think over the last couple of games here, you've limited your turnovers. Very, very good BYU team. You limited your turnovers. Utah, maybe not so much, but you did keep the turnovers under 10. These are, components of the game where you have to, the more possessions you get and the less possessions they have, the better your odds are coming out with a victory here. JT Toppin is going to need to have a huge game. The last couple of games, he's gotten in foul trouble early. And I think that goes to the point that you said that he's still kind of getting back into the feel of the game, because some of these fouls that he's getting are like lazy fouls. Mm-hmm. Like, bro, just, D up. I think you're better than that. And I think him being successful on the board and being on the court for a majority of the time here, this is going to propel you. But you're going to need to have all hands on deck. Darian's going to have a good game. Chance, Elijah, and JT to, at least keep us in the fight here.
That's a good key there. I'm going to say, I mean, my big thing is that the stars got to be the stars. That JT, it's time to get your sea legs up under you and be ready to go. So, I think that's going to be really big. Darren Williams, he's really come on lately. Well, I'm going to need you to be a star again. I'm going to need you to ball out, put up another 20-burger again. Elijah Hawkins, let's see what you got, right? Like it's time for all of it to come together and for the stars to be the stars in this game in order for us to defeat them, right? Like, I think this is, in my opinion, going to be, and I wouldn't have pegged this as the game, but this will be likely the toughest home game of the year. And unfortunately, I wish it wasn't this early because I feel like people don't know it yet. I question how loud and packed and full the USA is going to be. And I know that they're probably out recruiting students and saying, hey, guys, you have a game this Saturday. I know they're doing all that right now. And luckily, because the number 3 is beside Iowa State's name, hopefully the fans and the students realize how big of a game it is. But because, sometimes it takes a little bit to get everybody amped up. It's January 11th. Students just got back to campus, right? And so, I really hope that we have the energy we need from Raider Riot because we're going to need it.
Need every bit of it. And it's super cold here as well. So it's like, give me a reason to go out there. And it's just for a student, I guess, you would really hope they would show out.
It is going to be in the 50s this Saturday, which isn't warm, but it's not terrible. You can make that shake. You can make that shake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. There shouldn't be any excuses other than, just coming back into town, ready for school to start. So
absolutely. So it is time for our Prize Picks predictions. That's right, Prize Picks. Download the app, and we will give you a 100% match up to $100 using our promo code TAKES12 TAKES12 for free hundo right there for you in your pocket. That's TAKES12 TAKES12. So, Joe, what is your prediction for this game? Who wins it, and what's the score?
As much as I would love to call for the home team here to get the job done, I just think that Iowa State is just the better basketball team as a whole right now. I think Tech is slowly working their way to getting to that, with JT Toppin coming back into the fold, Federico getting more minutes, Overton getting more minutes, and also Christian Anderson, eating up a lot of minutes there. I just think that Iowa State is a better basketball team here. I think Tech is going to give them a fight. It's going to be closer than what a lot of people believe this game's going to be. But I have Iowa State winning this game 82-75.
82. Let me tell you something. For Joe, for you to pick a Tech loss, did you pick a Tech loss for football?
No.
Yeah, I'm about to say, for you to pick a Tech loss, that is this may be your first Tech loss since baseball season. I think baseball season you picked us to lose a few times, but this is your first Tech loss predicted since baseball season. But I don't, and tell me if I'm wrong. I put you on the spot there, but I don't think it's necessarily because you don't think Tech's capable, because Iowa State's just that damn good.
Right. I think Tech's capable. I mean, if Darren Williams has a performance like he did against Kansas last year, where he doesn't miss a shot and goes for 30 points, I would say it's definitely doable that we could pull off this victory. But I think all the stars have to align here. I think you have to get this from this player, you have to get this from this player, you have to get this from this player. As much as I would love to see that happen, I don't feel it. I really don't feel fully confident in it. I feel confident in the fight because of how the BYU game ended and how we played the back end of that game, the last, 7-8 minutes of the game, most notably, Darren Williams singularly. But I just think that this Iowa State team is just a little bit too much for us right now.
So I'll give you some backstory on this. So for Texas Tech versus Iowa State, Iowa State actually has the lead in the series by one game, 22-21. So Tech has an opportunity to tie it with this win here this year. The last 10 games, Tech has actually marched our way back. We've won 7 of the last 10 games against Iowa State, which kind of really shows where we have been as a program recently. Both teams are 8-6 against the spread, which is very interesting. And right now, actually, as we're recording this on Thursday evening, there is no spread for this game. I'm sure it'll come out on Friday, so for you betting degenerates. Now, I talked about them being a very well-balanced team. Texas Tech is the 7th ranked offense in KenPom. 6th is Iowa State. Texas Tech is the 58th ranked defensive team in KenPom, as we should be. Our defense hasn't been that great. But, Iowa State's defense it's not as high as 6. It's 9th. It's
sound, man.
They got it all figured out. And so I think your prediction of 82-75, it tracks. It is, I think that is about where I would probably have it too, but not to pull a Jeremy and have a unoriginal prediction. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to give up some points because we just do that. But I'm actually going to go ahead and say it's 78. Let's do 78-70. 78-70. Yeah, I still do think we keep it under 10. I think that we're gonna, I think this team will play up to the competition. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be very reminiscent of the A&M game, where it is a fight, we're in it, but just the better team prevails. That game against A&M, I hate to break it to you, I know some people may not agree with me, but the better team prevailed. And I think in this one, it's going to be the same thing, where two teams are fighting, but the better team prevails. But hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. Another place where, before we end this episode, another place that I hope that I'm wrong is when it comes to what I've been seeing from the Lady Raiders. So the Lady Raiders recently, I talked earlier in an episode about the start of the season they've had, right? The start of the season they've had has been a pretty impressive one. Bailey Maupin is really starting to finally be the player we thought she would be when she was a top 150 player out of high school as a star. She's realizing that about herself and being that star player. Jazz Shavers also kind of recognizing her star power, both of them averaging over 13 points a game, right? I think the biggest problem they have right now is that it's almost like, hey, it's your turn to have a star game. It's my turn to have a star game. I like them both to consistently have star games. But at one point, the Lady Raiders were 12-2 on the season. Had just whooped up on the worst team in the conference, that is Houston. And we're at a good spot. And then they played Arizona State on the road, but a team that should be at worst your peer. And Arizona State completely controlled that game and beat us silly. And it was a game again where Josh Schaefer's had 24 points, but Bailey Maupin only had 3. My turn, your turn. And it didn't look great. And it also, what makes it even worse is that after, the importance of the Arizona State game was because we were going to have back-to-back ranked games afterwards. We were going to have Ioka Lee and Kansas State, and then afterwards we were going to have they were 12th ranked, and afterwards we were going to have 17th ranked West Virginia. So we really needed that win against Arizona State to prove something. We lost that one. Afterwards we played Kansas State, and the final score is going to show a 20-point beatdown. I will say this, in that game, 3 of the 4 quarters, Tech was right in it. Unfortunately, the third quarter still happened, where they got outscored by 19 points in one quarter. Right. And just it looked awful. I mean, K-State went on 20-0 run. We were turnover after turnover, stupid shot after stupid shot, and just a string of awful mistakes. Awful mistakes. And so it didn't matter that in the fourth quarter we outscored them by 5. It didn't matter that at halftime we were a single digits down. Like, we were really fighting in that game. None of that mattered because of how bad that third quarter was. And I don't know, the adjustments that were made on K-State side were not made on Tech side. It was pretty bad. And so you think, okay, K-State, they got some dogs over there. This is a team that is fighting for the Big 12 championship. This is a team that you think has not just Ioka Lee, but they also have Serena Sundell. They have Tamira Poindexter. They have some players over there. This is a team that has contender, dark horse national contender written on them, right? So you're like, okay, West Virginia is still a good team, but at home should be something that's a little bit better that we can at least show that fight. And you get whooped even worse. I mentioned how the Kansas State game, us losing by 20, isn't as reminiscent of how the game actually went for at least 75% of it. We lost to West Virginia by 36, and that is closer than it really was.
17 points in the first half to their 42 at home. We had no fight at all in this basketball game. 0. And now it's starting to point, right? Like the last couple of years with Coach Gerlich, and she's the scapegoat, right? This is obviously the scapegoat with the problem here, right? You go on these runs in the preseason where you're having a winning record. Once you come into conference, you're an absolute ghost of yourself. And, you thought you're starting off on the right foot, beating Houston. Then you have that beatdown by Arizona State, Kansas State, and now West Virginia. Now you start looking around and figuring out where some of these wins are going to come from, because you're trying to get and stay relevant in the Big 12 to potentially, I think this is wins and losses thing is what's going to get Aaliyah Chavez to Lubbock, Texas. I don't think it's a money thing, but if you don't have a winning culture around here and or a staff at some point in time, I mean, what's going to happen here? There just wasn't any fight there. And for them to get whooped like that at home, it's starting to become too much of a norm for us, and I don't like it.
Yeah, and y'all know me. I almost never put weight on a 17-year-old recruit's decision. This ain't your normal 17-year-old recruit. Nope. This is a program-changing recruit. This is Micah Hudson on steroids, to be honest. Yeah. Right? I've even heard Aaliyah Chavez compared to like the female LeBron. I've heard this. Like, she could have that gravitas. We've looked at, like, she's a bigger prospect than Caitlin Clark was out of high school. Right? I think that's just, I mean, she was the National Player of the Year as a junior, guys. Like, this is just how good Aaliyah Chavez is. And the fact that we're in our final 2. And I think for her, she is really looking at it. You mentioned it. She's just saying, I just need y'all to be competent. I just need y'all to give me a program that I feel like I can do something with, right? Look at what Juju Watkins did at USC. And she's like, well, USC, they at least weren't bottom of the barrel. They were a mid-tier team that Juju was able to elevate. Just give me that, and maybe I can work with something. But how am I going to sit here and even blame Aaliyah Chavez when you losing by 36 at home? Like, I can't blame her if she decides to go anywhere else. Like, so that's the issue there. And then so if this program changing recruit doesn't come here, well, then that's when the questions start occurring of, well, what are we doing? Because I'll say this, and if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know I'm a big fan of Krista Gerlich. I have done nothing but big up her for years. I think where this program was before she got here, we were in the gutter for a multitude of reasons, not just for what we're putting on the court, but also for just some of the player abuse actions and multiple coaches with some of these issues. And so the fact that we had somebody who was able to right the ship there, that is a player's coach that does all this, is fantastic. However, eventually, we got to get some wins. And just not being the worst team in the conference. We were the worst team in the conference at one point. That can't be the bar. The bar can't be just we're not god-awful, right? We already got Houston to fill that role. We don't need the bar to be not god-awful. We need to be competitive. We need to be, honestly, you see where West Virginia is right now, 17th ranked? That's where we should be. I'm not even saying that we need to be TCU or Kansas State at the top of the conference. I'm saying we need to be where West Virginia and Utah are, which is competitive. Dark horse candidates. So where the men's team currently is, right? Like, that's the program that we're looking at from the women's side. And I am beginning to look at Krista Gerlich and say, I don't know if you can do it. This is year 5 now. This is year 5. Last year was supposed to be the first year you made the NCAA tournament. That was supposed to be the end of the rebuild. Yep. And instead of it being the end of the rebuild, it was one of the most disappointing women's seasons that I can remember, just because of what the expectations were to start the season. So now we're looking at it, and now you're still getting blown out by 36. And I get it. Women's basketball blowouts happen all the time. There's a big gap between the haves and the have-nots. But from what Kirby Hocutt feels this program should be as far as a whole, from what, you know, Rob Giovanetti and Cody Campbell and just like everything we've talked about, especially talking about getting Nijiri Kennedy over in the softball side, what we're seeing soccer doing. Like, it's and, you know, I know I've gotten under hot water for mentioning them before, but we can't have another volleyball. We already got volleyball that can't get right. We don't need another program that can't get right either. Right. And so, like, I really like what Coach Gerlich has done, but it's starting to be that time to bring out that microscope. And if we don't get that program changing commitment, the clock begins. The clock begins. And it'll be time to start looking, because we just can't continually do this, you know?
Yeah.
So
1-3 in the conference isn't a great start. And you're going to have to really pull a lot out of your bag on the back end in the middle of the conference to, you know, pull yourself from where you're at right now. Am I saying that that's impossible? No, but I mean, the deck's stacked against you. It is absolutely stacked.
Well, it also doesn't help that we're playing 11th ranked TCU.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to win the games that you're favored in. That Arizona State loss is going to linger heavy on this team. Like, I mean, you had an opportunity of going 2-0 in conference play, you know, minus that single quarter in Kansas State. You did fight for 3/4 of it. West Virginia, I don't know what the hell happened. You just didn't show up. And then now you're having to go against a TCU team who looks like they are every bit real. A year coming off of, you know, having to look for players within the campus to fill a roster. You know, it's just
You know, maybe Cody Campbell needs to go over there, because they are going to start going to the women's team and buying players. That's what TCU is doing. They're like, hey, listen, Sedona Prince, you were a hot little TikTok star. How about we pay you money for him and you leave Oregon and come on over here? Hey, Madison Connor, you don't like Tucson, Arizona that much. Come on over here. Haley Van Lith, all that abuse you took at Baton Rouge, come on over here. It's less abuse over in Fort Worth. And now they're the favorites to win the Big 12, you know. So if you are a student listening to this, there is actually even if you're local, there is a doubleheader this weekend for Iowa State TCU. Let me tell you something. That's probably the best bang for your buck to watch two opponents come to the USA that are both very good. You got the favorites to win the men's Big 12 and the favorites to win the women's Big 12 coming to the USA on the same day. That's pretty amazing. But anyways, I don't think we need to predict what's going to happen against TCU. So, Joe, anything else you want to say to the people?
They'll be there. No, just
they will be in present.
Just rolling into basketball season. We still have the lingering stuff that's going on with the football team and football program itself. But that, that's going to be taking a backseat to basketball. And then, coming up soon in the next, 30 plus days, we'll have baseball, we'll have softball, in full swing, given what we did in the off season with the women's softball team and then the baseball team, doing the same thing and being consistently ranked up there, to see what kind of progress that they've made from last year to this year. These sports are going to come fast and furious, no pun intended, but it's just one of these things. And we're going to be here for it as much as we can. It's a lot of coverage, a lot of sports going on, but just hang out with us and we'll give our thoughts. Big game on Saturday against Iowa State. If you're here in town, please do show out if you can. If you can't, I understand, because the flu's going around. Don't want to be around all those people. So show your support wherever you can.
No, absolutely. Big game. Big games this weekend. So we'll see what both of these squads are made of as we keep going. So and hopefully Jeremy's on the next episode. I don't know what the hell happened with him tonight. Something crazy apparently. So we'll get the feedback here pretty shortly. But for the Red Raider expert that is Joe Lopez, this is your boy Albie Shore, and you have been listening to the Tortillas Takes podcast, part of the 1012 Network. As always, stay wrecked, people.